What's up, Epic? Hey, good Thursday evening to you. It is Thursday night throwback. So good to see you. Melanie is with me tonight. Hey, Mel.
Hello. Good to see everybody tonight. Hello, everyone out there.
Yeah, good to see everybody. We got Kim on there. What's up, Kim? I see you. Tracy, good evening to you as well. Chad, hello, sir. Jody's on there. Hi, Jody. Hey, Mr. Pianosi. Good to see you on as well. Good evening. Hey, Kendra. Good to see you too. Good evening. Thanks for joining us here on Thursday night throwback. It is 7:01 on your PM dial. Wait, that's radio. That doesn't make any sense. But either way, it's 7 o'clock. And this is where you'll find us, 7 o'clock on Thursday nights, right here, either on YouTube or our Facebook page. So thanks for joining us tonight. We are in the middle of our Rhythms of a Disciple series. And so we've been talking about just some of the rhythms that are in the lives of disciples, just some things that we do habitually and regularly that differentiate us from other people, right? And so we're talking about what are those rhythms, what do they look like, and how can we implement them in our lives? And this past week, Steve spoke at Epic on this rhythm of committing. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. In fact, committing to, let me bring up my graphic here. Here are our rhythms. And the one tonight is on commit. Commit to one another, be vulnerable and gracious, hold one another accountable, and serve one another. So we're going to talk a little bit about committing. Let's talk a little bit about commitment before we even jump in with chat here, Mel, just to find out what exactly are we talking about when it comes to commitment. What is commitment?
Well, when you look it up, it's an agreement or a pledge to do something, which makes sense. But I kind of was thinking too, it's also it's a devotion to something or someone or a faithfulness, I feel like, to something or someone. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, devotion or faithfulness. I like that. Hey, Bayless Bunch, good to see you guys on as well. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are talking about the commit rhythm of a disciple, committing to each other, especially just being vulnerable, being gracious for one another, holding each other accountable, et cetera, et cetera. And Melanie was just sharing what commitment looks like. It's kind of being a devotion to someone, a vow that we make to act a certain way or to do something. That's commitment. And so let's see, how do you think the nature of commitment, Mel, has changed from just a few generations ago? How have you seen it change maybe in your life? And then how do you think it's just changed in culture?
I mean, I think it's changed a ton. Like, honestly, I feel like it's changed a ton. I was thinking about this and I think of like the older generations, whoever that is, I don't know, but where people could just shake, you know what I mean? And if you did a handshake on something, you could kind of commit. That was their commitment, you know what I mean? And that was just almost as good as it was done. You know what I mean? Like if we shake hands, you can count on it. And these days, I feel like people need a contract that's signed and notarized and detailed out, then
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's hard to trust someone or take someone at their word for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think about even when it comes to our work. You had talked about just older generations. I think of my grandfather. Both of my grandfathers worked for the same organization. Basically they started there and ended their career there, retired from there, and used to see that a lot. My mom did something similar when she went to work. She retired from the place that she started, and now it's a lot less likely, I think, now for us to work in one place, from the time that we get out of school until we retire. It's not very common. I think we see that right in marriages, in relationships as well, that the commitment level there, the percentage of divorce, et cetera, is just much higher than it used to be. There's a lot of reason for that, right? Just a ton of different reasons for why that is in our culture. But, and we don't want to necessarily get into those reasons today, but I think it is good to just point out that, it used to be that I think commitment was more commonplace. And now, being somewhere for a couple of years, working for someone for a couple of years, being in a relationship for a couple of years seems just like a lot lot longer of a time now because it's less commonplace, right? Hey, Deb, I see you there. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are talking about commitment and specifically the rhythm in the life of a disciple of committing to one another. So if you're just joining us, that's what we're talking about. I'm going to ask you, chat, a question because I really want you to help us tonight talk through this idea of commitment. Why do you think, chat, why do you think commitment is so important in the life of a Christ follower, especially committing to a community and to a local church? Why would that be an important thing for a Christ follower? I want to hear from you, and Melanie and I want to discuss some of your thoughts and opinions about why committing to a community is so important. Let's first, while you guys are thinking of that, while you're typing it into chat, let's talk about what commitment is not. Commitment, here's one thing that I want to say that I really believe profoundly about the church, that God is not in heaven watching down on us with a checklist, checking off boxes for every time that we show up on a Sunday morning for worship. Although it can feel like that sometimes, depending on where you are in your faith and how you grew up, that, I just have to get there in order to please God, or in order to probably get there a number of times, right, so that I can go to heaven. And that's just maybe a traditional way of thinking about going to church. But I just want to reiterate that as we start and as we talk about reasons to commit to a local church, showing up on Sunday so that you can go to heaven is not one of those reasons. In fact, we believe that our hope in Christ for our salvation, Christ is the only reason that we are saved. He is the only reason for our eternity, not showing up on Sunday. And so just want to mention that, first and foremost, that's not why we gather together as a church. It's not why we're committed to a church. Isn't because it saves us somehow. We've been talking a lot about just the Passover event, and when we look at the Old Testament, what we can see there, we can learn a lot from that event and how it pertains to us in our life, especially when we think about Jesus and him going to the cross. But when God saved his people from Egypt and from slavery, you notice he didn't save them because of what they did. That he didn't save them because of their behavior. He saved them because they were unable to live his way. They were unable to be his people. And so God first delivers them and then asks them to live his way, right? Because he noticed they needed freedom if they were going to be able to live his way. And so when we look at what Christ has done for us on the cross, his death, his resurrection, we can look at it through the lens of the Old Testament and the Passover event, and we can see that, God first wants to free us and deliver us from our slavery to sin, right? Because unfortunately, that slavery is keeping us from being the people who he has created us to be. It is our just being mastered by sin keeps us from living his way. And so, salvation comes through Christ and through his death and resurrection, not because of what we've done. But then, God frees us so that we can begin to live his way. And I believe, gathering together with the local church, being a part of a local church is just a really, really important part of living his way. And so let's talk a little bit about, again, why committing to a local church, committing to a community of people, doing life together is so important for the Christ follower. Let's go to chat first. Let's see what you guys said. So Mike said to hold each other accountable. That's a great reason to be together with the local church, because where else are you going to have accountability to God's way if not from God's people, right? Mel, what do you think about that?
That's one of the things that I feel like we all need. We know we need to be accountable to someone. I feel like, if you think about successful, diets or exercise plans, you need those accountability partners that'll kind of check in on you. I know Chad, he gets texts from a couple guys every day. Hey, where's your workout? Because he posts his elliptical workout. And then nights, and a little before the surgery, some nights he was like, I don't know if I want to do it. And then Jim Thorpe would text him, hey, dude, I haven't seen your post on Facebook. And he's like, all right, I got to go do it. So it's like amazing how much you need that accountability, and even more so just in our faith and all the stuff that we go through every day and just get worn down. We need each other to keep each other going there for sure.
Yeah, to keep pressing forward. There's plenty of times, I think, where, living the life of Christ is difficult for us to do. And without, others spurring us on and encouraging us and holding us accountable, we wouldn't always make the right choice or the right decision, I feel like. And so accountability is so important. Let's keep going. I have some more thoughts on that, but let's keep going in chat, and then maybe we'll add some here on just a little bit. So Deb said, relationship is what we were created for. You need to be plugged in so that relationship can develop. That is so true.
Very true.
I think all of us, there is like a longing to belong, right? I think that's pretty general and pretty common just among people in general. We have this desire to belong to something and to want to belong, I think, because we were created that way. I think we were created for community. We were created to be a part of something bigger than just ourselves, right? We know that God, that's really important to God, to be thinking about others and being more selfless than we are selfish. And so, we were meant to live for others, to be in relationship with others, to be thinking about others. So, man, that's crucial. I think you hit it right there, Deb. Relationship is so important. We were made for community. In the world that we're in right now with just COVID, I'm hearing from people all the time of just how isolated that they feel. And, if it's ever been evident, I think in the history of people, it's like, man, we've always kind of known that we wanted to belong. We've always kind of known that we needed people and relationships in our life. But if we ever really knew it, man, now is the time that we just know it without a doubt. It's hard to do life on our own and just to be isolated, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think, I just think about the deep relationships I have. I didn't go to church half my life. So sure, I had good relationships, but I just think of the friends that I've made and the people that are in my life now that I can count on. I mean, there's just nothing like it when you can build those relationships, and being a part of the church is what's given that to me for sure.
Yeah. And I think for me too, I talk to a lot of people who are new, who will move into the town of Portland. And, I always will say something to the effect of, man, I just love the community. Growing up in Lansing was just a kind of different Portland, smaller community. So it's always like, man, I just love the community feel. And I think I've noticed over time that while Portland, I think, is a great community, I don't know if I would feel so strongly about the community of Portland if it wasn't for the church. The church has just been, brought so much meaning when it comes to community and friendship and relationship to me that it's hard for me then to separate what the church between the church and the community, right? And those two have just worked tremendously in my life to bring about some meaning.
I've heard people that move into town and they say it's hard to kind of break in. You know what I mean? For those of us who grew up here, and then people move in, and I feel like just getting a part of a church community is huge and getting connected there.
Yeah, because I noticed I didn't feel like I had any trouble, moving into town, and I feel like that's probably why. Because I had the church there to really help me feel like I belonged and to accept me. And, we again joined small groups and just got to know people. And that's just been such a blessing in my life. So relationships so important. Let's go. Let's see what Chad said here. It's not an easy road to walk. We must commit to God's calling in our life. Otherwise, we'll just quit on him. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the accountability thing we were just talking about, right? That it is difficult to walk this life of a Christ follower, and you need other people encouraging you and supporting you to do it, because it's hard. I can't tell you recently how many times, but over my walk, my walk following Jesus, there's definitely been many times where I've had to turn to fellow Christ followers in my life in tears or pain, because the life is just such a hard life. It's hard when we've been hurt to offer forgiveness. It's hard to love our enemies. It's the things that Jesus calls us to do are tough.
And I think too, it just knowing that there's people that have the same beliefs and values as you, and when you go to them, they're gonna speak truth to you in love.
Mhm.
I think that is so huge, that we
Yeah.
can, have that trust. We can't do that with just anybody and get the direction that we really, really want.
Yeah, sometimes, if you're like me, you live in your head. And unfortunately, I feel like sometimes, one incident in our life can turn everything bad, even though everything may be good. 95% of it may be good. You may have a 5% little area of your life that's not going well. It feels like the whole thing's not going well. Same thing with relationships. For example, if one relationship that we have is not going well, it can sometimes feel like none of them are going well. And so it's really good, I think, to have that perspective, from other Christ followers who can, and this is to Jody's point, even just moving on here, to encourage one another in the faith, to remind us of truth, to remind us of the promises of God, and to maybe remind us, what it looked like yesterday, and
Mhm.
how it doesn't always look like that.
Yeah,
Brian.
just to remember what God thinks of us too. We just kind
Yeah,
of take in these things from other people and ourselves, and we need to be reminded that we are God's children and that He loves us and created us. And I feel like we need to be reminded of that for sure.
yeah. One of the great just activities that we do in our discipleship groups as we're going through our books together. There's a couple different times where we kind of pause. We take a break from kind of the curriculum, if you will, and we just begin to speak into each other's lives. One of those is kind of like gifts and talents that we see in people, and to have others speak that into you sometimes. Like, that's not typically a normal thing. You're going to work every day. You're in your relationships. You don't often take time to tell people, man, you are really good at this. I really admire you for this. And I just love that we do that in discipleship groups, because you just need to hear it sometimes. But
And
then,
in the women's groups, we cry when that happens. So,
yeah, well, sometimes in the men's group we do as well, uh, because it's a pretty rare thing to be
Mhm.
told, how, again, really what we're doing there is saying, this is the way that God sees you. And to be able to speak for God, in those moments, to remind people of His promises, His truth, the value that you have in God's eyes, is a powerful, powerful thing. Because we don't always recognize that value in our life. I think we struggle with it, right?
Yeah.
And so to have other Christ followers who can speak on behalf of God sometimes can tell us we're forgiven when we need to know that, and be reminded that we have been forgiven. To just speak grace into our life, to speak truth into our life, so powerful and important for us as Christ followers. And when we're not committed, to a local body, again, I think commitment is important, because you're not going to just say those things to anyone, and you're probably not going to just hear those things from everyone. It's someone who has to. It doesn't even mean anything, right? If somebody just says it, they have to kind of know you. They have to be with you. They have to know you, and then they have to speak it. And then, once we can trust a person, once we can let some of those walls down in our life, then it becomes meaningful to us. And so I think that's why commitment is important. Whether it's, in a discipleship group atmosphere, that's what's happening, right? We're committing to journey together. But also just in our regular relationships as Christ followers, whether we're talking about just being committed to each other or being committed to a local body, it just comes with it just a level of trust. And we can do that. We can speak into each other's lives. And,
Yep.
sometimes I think, probably before I came to Christ, I thought that Christians, the way that they spoke to one another was mostly judgment and what we're doing wrong all the time, which is just so untrue. Maybe it's true of some places, but it
Maybe.
sure doesn't seem to be that way
Yeah.
in our local church. It's just, again, I've been spoken to more often than not of grace, and just been encouraged and supported in my walk with other Christ followers. So, I hope that other people can see that. At the same time, don't want to downplay the truth that, there is pain that comes from being a part of a local church. Mel, you've been hurt before from within the church.
Yep.
I've been hurt as well, for one reason or another. People let you down, and
Mhm.
a local church community lets you down as well, right? Whether that's just corporately, the pastors definitely are not perfect and will let you down. And so, that is just a truth. The Bible talks about, how we as Christ followers sharpen one another. And it says iron sharpening iron. And I think about that process of just two kind of I imagine swords, I guess, is what I imagine as the Bible talks about that. But two swords just kind of, slicing against each other, like in a butcher shop when the butcher gets that round. I'm not even sure what they call it. You butchers out there may know, or people. They get that round, long thing, and they just run the knife, on both sides, honing the knife. And it's a very violent, the sound like kind of almost sounds like nails on a chalkboard. Like it's a violent kind of process. And this is how the Bible describes, our relationships within the church. They are sometimes that way, where we do rub up against each other, sometimes. And that process is violent. But at the same time, that's how we get sharpened, right? And last week, Mel, you had talked about that process of refining steel. And just how that came through the heat, and again, a very violent kind of process. And what the psalmist was talking about last week was really that process of how, that road through the wilderness was just a tough road, and how God used that tough road, to refine them like silver. And we can see that too. That relationships are tough. They just are, whether you're within the church or not, because. Mm-hmm. I think we have certain expectations for people, for how they're going to care for us, for the things that they're going to say to us, that the value they're going to bring. And we just get let down sometimes. And sometimes it's a truth. Sometimes it's truth that's spoken in us that hurts our feelings because we just don't want to hear it.
I feel like some of the most the times of most growth for me is when I've had those people that have had issues, but they come to me and we talk through them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not comfortable. It's not easy to hear sometimes, but just having those people have that value of like, I've got something I need to talk to you about, and just the rubbing together of that, like we have different views on things and stuff like that. But I feel like that's when I've grown in my faith and in people and just, I mean, I don't like those occasions, but I do know that there is a purpose to them for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely not a comfortable conversation to have with people when you don't agree. And I think, I think right now in our world today, the church is in a place where it's not always agreeing, whether it's politically, whether it's over the virus and the things that are happening with the virus, whether it's the things that the church's response, right, to the virus and to the pandemic. There are a lot of things that we just don't necessarily agree on. And so the question, I think, in the midst of that is, how do we respond? How are we responding as Christ followers when we don't agree? Because at least it seems like to me, I know how the world deals with that, which is to what's the word I'm looking for? Avoid each other.
Avoid. Unfriend.
Unfriend, that's a good way of saying it. Unfollow.
Unfollow.
Avoid each other because, again, I think for whatever reason, we get really worked up when we don't agree. I think it's partly because we feel it's probably something going on within us, is my guess, where we feel less than when others don't agree with us. And so that can cause us to avoid others and avoid the situation. But here's the thing, the Bible talks about loving our enemies. And, Steve talked this past week about just the story of the Good Samaritan, and, brought that up and just talked about how, Jesus tells us to be like a Samaritan in this case, not like a priest or I can't remember what the other example was there. But, how Jesus was just laying it out, that the Samaritan is the one who cares for people. And that's just, again, loving our enemy, thinking about a Samaritan who was the enemy to the people of Israel as an example of someone who's loving well, forgiving our enemies. Really our enemies are the people who need to be forgiven, right? In other words, if someone didn't need forgiveness, there would be no need for forgiveness. So of course, in those situations where we need to forgive, it's because somebody needs to be forgiven. And those are really tough places to be. And yet this is what the Bible asks us to do. It asks us to do the hard things, to love our enemy, to forgive those who need forgiveness. And I think this is what it means, when it's talking about iron sharpening iron. There are some really uncomfortable positions that we have to be in as Christ followers. not to act like the rest of culture and just to avoid each other and unfollow each other, but really sharpen one another, learn from each other's viewpoints. I think try to walk in each other's shoes, get to know why people feel the way that they feel, why their personality is the way that it is, why are they that way. Really, when we get to know people's story, it just becomes really hard, I think, to just write someone off because of their opinion. You start to see why they believe, right, the way that they believe, and why they act the way that they do, even. And as you do that, and you get to know someone's story, it's just harder not to love them. And I think the next step of that is just praying for someone. I think we talked about that a few weeks ago. Once we get to know them and then begin to pray for them, it's just harder not to love them the way that the Bible says to love them. But man, it is a difficult thing to do, and it sure feels like iron rubbing up against iron, in those instances. Like, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather not go through the sound that it makes, and sends the shivers up my spine. And yet that's what we have to do. Brian says, you have to stay the course no matter what. And that, again, that just goes back to what we've been talking about, that, the Bible tells us of the way, and there is a way that we have to walk. And, the commitment process is saying we're going to sacrifice, we're going to give up when it really calls for us to do things like forgive. Those are the times we're actually going to do it. We can't just talk about forgiving and how important it is, but then all of a sudden needing it in our life and never doing it. Yeah. We have to stay the course. We have to actually do what we say that we're about. And if forgiveness is the thing that we're about, then we have to also, we can't just always receive forgiveness and be reminded that we've received forgiveness, but we also have to dole it out when it's appropriate. And so it is crucial, I think, for us to commit to a local church and to a local body of believers. For that reason, it actually strengthens and matures our faith. It's much easier, I think, for us just to move on to another body, or even to just avoid committing to a local body altogether. I do know people who do that as well. That's the easier thing to do, but to stay the course, man, is such a difficult thing.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that this week when we get into engage and how to engage and and it gets messy. So.
Yeah, oh boy, isn't that the truth? I look forward to that, Mel. That will be awesome, because you're right, it does get messy. I think what the world, tells us is that diversity is not a good thing. In other words, when we talk about what we believe and what we agree to, that our diversity is a weakness. And more and more we see how things are just getting more and more polarized in our culture. That kind of middle gray area seems to disappear. Just the ideas become more and more, polarized. I think for this reason, because again, diversity seems to be a weakness, and so however we believe, we have to believe it to the nth degree. And we're just seeing that again, whether it comes to the church, whether it comes to politics, whatever it comes, that middle kind of gray area is dissipating. But actually, the Bible tells us an interesting thing, that our diversity is actually our strength. And Paul talks a lot about diversity. He talks about how we as people are part of a local body. We call our epic body a body of believers. Because we are a body in the sense that, there's a lot of people making up one thing. And so we're a body in that sense, but also we make up the body of Christ, the physical presence of Christ on the earth. And then Paul goes on to talk about what that means, right, for a body, that we all can't be an eye. If we were all an eye, we'd see really well, but we wouldn't do anything else very well. We couldn't walk around, we couldn't feel, we couldn't smell, obviously we need all different parts of the body. And so what Paul says is, our diversity is actually our strength. And so when we don't agree on things, when we see from different perspectives, that is actually a strength. When we can sit down and learn someone else's perspective, especially when it comes to us, but then just about the world in general, when we can learn new perspectives, we can grow more mature in our faith. And I think it becomes easier to love people better, as we grow. So the world, I think, would tell us that diversity is a weakness, but man, I gotta believe, because the Bible tells me that the diversity is really where our strength comes in. And, it goes on to just talk about how through Christ, our differences are not really differences, whether that's a skin color, our gender, whatever it may be that keeps us from being different, that when we are united in Christ, we are stronger because of it. And those differences just kind of fade away because we begin to work together, united as one body. We start to see ourselves as one body instead of just different people. So I don't know if you got any thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I also just think of all the different abilities and gifts that people bring together and how much more we get accomplished when we work together.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times, I get a phone call or I'll get somebody that's in need of something and I know somebody that I can be like, oh, they could help you with this. Or, I mean, that's just the way we kind of can all come together because I can't go fix somebody's furnace, but I know I can call Guy and he'll do what he can. So just working all of that, all of our gifts just coming together, pulling them together and just making an even bigger difference than what we could just individually.
Guy literally did just come fix our furnace too.
He did.
Guy, thank you. At the church, we had a furnace that was out on the kids' side, and
yes, at the church. Okay, I thought you meant at home. So.
No, but he was there that day, and man, he went above and beyond.
Thank God for him.
Thank God that he did. Yeah, thank God that we have people of differing gifts within the body because man, we just need it. I had just taken a kind of a assessment, if you will, as part of my schooling, just on my personality and things. And I recognize that like when it comes to administrative tasks, I am about as low as one can possibly be. I think the guy told me, anything under like, let's say 15%, I don't know, I'm just making that up, but anything under 15% and you're almost going to be in pain to do it. And I think I was at like 11. So it just goes to show you, again, when it comes to detail-oriented things and the work that goes into detail-oriented things, I'm horrible at it. So
that would be my top administration. That's right. Like way high for me. So
yeah. So thank you that we get to be on a team and get to be diverse. And thank you to all of you out there who are super high when it comes to administrative, tasks. I'm glad that we have you. And again, I'm glad that our gifts don't align. It's actually better that they don't, because it lets me focus in on the things that I enjoy. It lets me focus on the things that I'm skilled in, and it lets you do the same thing. And so, we talk about that a lot too, Mel, just, our differences and finding other people on the team who have the gifts that we don't have. It's a beautiful thing. We actually are better together and better because we're diverse. So it's just a beautiful thing.
Yep.
Let me post this out there. I just want you to know that we have a prayer team at Epic. I'm just going to post a link out there for you, but we have a prayer team at Epic. We also have an app for your smartphone. So if you're on iOS or you're on Android and you have a smartphone, we have an app out there. You can just search for Epic Church Portland, Michigan, and you'll find our app on the smartphone. That's just a good way to stay connected with us, and you'll see our events on there that we're doing. You'll find our prayer requests where you can, again, submit a prayer, and our prayer team will be praying for you. We have a couple from this past week that were submitted that our prayer team is just, they'll talk back and forth as they're praying, and we'll just continue to pray for you. So if you have any prayer requests, I just would encourage you, go out, download our app, and you can submit your prayer requests that way. I'm going to send another link here too, because also if you just want a next step in your faith, if you're new to Epic and you just want to take a step to get to know us a little bit, build relationship, maybe you're ready to connect with a discipleship group and, again, build some of these relationships that we've been talking about. You can do that through the app as well. You can click on that link that I just submitted in the chat. But what that's going to do is just let us know that you're ready for a next step. And so if that's a discipleship group, if that's serving somewhere, if you're new, you want to get involved, that's a great way to do it. But again, we just recommend go out and download our app. That's just a great way to stay connected with us, to let us know that you're ready for that next step or what have you. So just want to remind you about that as well. I think it's important just to kind of wrap up here because we're going over our half hour, but it's important we talked a little bit earlier just about those expectations that we have for our church, for people within the church, for pastors. I think it's just important that we set aside some of our ideas or expectations for that Epic is going to be a perfect church. with perfect people, because it's not, and or with perfect pastors, because it does not have those, for sure.
Yeah.
And just kind of set that aside, and again, let God begin to work where He's working within the local church. Just make a commit. If you're on the fence because you're waiting for that perfect place, I would just say set aside that expectation that anywhere is going to meet your needs perfectly. And even if they do at first, sooner or later, people will let you down. Your pastor will let you down. The people within the community will let you down, because we are people, we are human. And so I would just ask you, just set aside, some of those expectations, and just begin to, right where you are, just make a commitment. And I believe that making a commitment makes all the difference. Once you can commit to a local body, once you can begin to build trust together, I think it makes a huge difference on the value that community adds to your life, and the value that you add to that community as well. And until that commitment is made, I just think it's going to be hard for you to kind of fit in, if you will. It's hard to grow and mature in your faith. It's just, without that commitment, it's hard to let others speak into your life. So, so Deb said, if there was a perfect church, none of us would be allowed in. That is the truth.
Very true.
And yet we still have expectations for it to be perfect, right?
And I mean, I feel like that's that's the reason I didn't connect to many churches that I did attend, is I felt like I could never measure up. And so I'm like, well, I can't measure up to what they're, so I'm just going to just not do that anymore. So I'm so glad that we are not a perfect church.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the truth. So, if you're on the fence about it, I would just encourage you to commit to a local body, even if it's not Epic. Commit to wherever you're going right now, wherever you're attending, whatever group of people that you are worshiping with. Just make a commitment, and let go of some of those expectations, and just say, I'm here. I'm going to let God use these people in my life. And I definitely want to be used by God to build up this body of believers. And I think it'll make a huge difference when it comes to your faith and growing in your faith, right? And growing mature in your faith. So I just would encourage you to do that. We'll be right back here again next Thursday night for Thursday Night Throwback at 7 p.m. You can join us on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page. We're Epic Community Church. We are in Portland, Michigan. If you're in that area or around that area, or just driving through on a Sunday, we'd love to see you. We do gather on Sunday mornings in person at 10:15 a.m. We also live stream our service at 10:15 as well, both to our YouTube page, our Facebook channel. You can always download our app. That is going to tell you where all those places are if you don't know. And also just tell you what we got coming up and how you can get involved. So we just encourage you to do that as well. Next week, we are talking about, as Melanie said before, we're talking about engage and the rhythm of engaging, both inside the church, outside the church, spiritual conversations, meeting needs. We're moving into kind of the mission part of our rhythm. Really looking forward to doing that. So excited for that, Melanie, for Sunday. So join us Sunday morning, join us next Thursday. I would prefer it if you joined us at both, because I love just seeing you and I love connecting with you. So thanks for joining us tonight. On behalf of Pastor Melanie and myself and everyone at Epic Community Church, we love you. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight. So long. Bye-bye.